So now that we've completed our height material in the last video, I want to go ahead and start finalizing the outputs of our information here. So I'm going to get rid of our base material. I'm just going to make sure that we're plugging all of these guys into the appropriate nodes. And I'm just going to right click on our graph and I'm going to view outputs in 3D. And so this is going to allow us to visualize our outputs that we've got so far. And because we don't have any albedo, metallic, or roughness, we're going to get this nice kind of black looking, like very, very wet or plasticky material. And so I'm going to, first thing is plug in a uniform color to our roughness. I'm going to go over to grayscale and I'm just going to bring this up to kind of a mid-gray so that we're not getting a lot of reflection or very specular reflection, but a lot of diffuse. And this is going to allow us to just work on our albedo first. So the first thing I want to do with this is I want to come in here to our final height map. And I'm just going to plug that guy into our albedo here so that we can start to see something. And so with this, I'm going to add a gradient map. And I'm going to just start by laying out some base colors for our snow, not even looking at our rocks. So I'm going to come into our gradient editor here. And I'm just going to get rid of this black value. And you can see we're going to get a lot of very, very bright white. And so I'm going to bring this guy in. I'm just going to kind of decrease that to a gray value for now, but I want to bring this over to more of a blue. Maybe just bringing this white value up a little bit more. And this is getting a little bit too difficult to see. So I'm going to come up to our environment and edit. And I'm going to come down and bring this to 0 again, just so that we can see the actual color values that we're going to get. I'm going to come back into our editor here. And I want to bring this just a little bit as an off-white. And so we can see that we're getting some bluish color, but for the most part, we want to be getting more of a white value. And that blue still might be a little too strong. So you can see this is a very, very bright color. But it's just going to add a little bit of difference to our material here. And so now I'm going to come down to our rocks here. And I'm going to add a gradient map here. And I'm going to bring this guy all the way up over top of our other gradient map for the snow. And I'm going to blend these together. And now I want to use a mask to mask off these this blend. And the mask that I'm going to use is our height mask between the two, because it's the best mask that we have for the various areas that are cut off by the snow. You can see that we don't have any real rock geometry here, yet we're still getting the rock color there because there technically is rocks underneath the snow. So I'm going to take the height mask from our height blend, and I'm going to bring this into the opacity. And so now you're going to see that any of the rocks that are above the snow are going to get colored, but any of the rocks below are going to be just left in the dust. So now with that, I'm going to colorize our rocks. And I'm going to make these rocks a little bit darker. So I'm going to bring this white down to a little bit more of a kind of a darker gray value. Maybe even a little bit darker. And that's just going to be our base color for this. And we're going to add a lot of information on top of that. So I want to bring this guy back. And I want to use our normal map. And what we're going to do for our normal map is I'm going to add a curvature node. Bring that guy up over here. And I'm going to blend between the two. And now you can see that we're going to run into another issue where we have a grayscale and a color value. And that's all right because we're actually going to use the curvature as our opacity. And we're going to blend this guy here with a uniform color. And you can see if we do that immediately, it's going to give us some results, but those aren't exactly the results I want because this curvature is too grayscale. We want to use this as more of a mask, so I want to add a levels node to really contrast these values. And so you can see as we kind of limit the information that's coming through, we're getting more of an edge mask here. And so what I want to do for that is I want to bring this color closer to white. And I want the blending mode to be more of an overlay. So it's going to take just a lighter value for this rock. And it's going to give us some nice kind of edge information around our rock here. Inversely, I want to do that with kind of the more recessed areas where dust is going to collect. And so I'm going to add another blend. I'm going to control and duplicate this levels node, and I'm just going to simply invert our levels here. So now we're going to get our kind of concave areas as more visible, or being visible, I should say. So when I plug a black node in, you can see it's going to give us the contours along the cracks and the crevices of the rock. So I want to change this color here to be a little bit more of a darker brown. And I also want to just decrease the opacity there so that it's not too visible, really. All right, and so that's starting to look pretty cool. The last thing I want to do for the rocks is I just want to add some random kind of warpy and I'm not even really sure what to call it, to be honest, kind of just random noise information to our material. So I'm going to add another blend. And what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to create a clouds 2 node. And I'm going to run it through a directional warp. And I'm going to plug itself into the top and bottom inputs here. And I'm going to change the intensity up to even something like 100. And so now I want to plug this guy into our blend, but you can see that we're going to get a red connection because, again, going from a grayscale to a color node is a big no-no in Designer. And so I'm going to add a gradient map. And you can see what this is going to do is just paint a lot of random noise information over top of our entire material. I'm going to bring that guy back up there. I'm going to play around just kind of with some of the blending options there, and we can do something kind of like soft light or even overlay, which is just going to give some subtle variation to the color of these rocks here. And you can see that maybe the edgeware is a little bit too sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and just peel back the white value so that we're not getting too sharp edgeware. Actually, maybe gone a little bit too far away. Something kind of like that. That's looking pretty cool. And we can see how this blends with our snow. And that's looking pretty gnarly. Now, the final thing I want to do with the snow is I want to make it look like it's kind of been washed up and over some of our rocks, because right now it just kind of looks like we've taken these rocks and plopped them down on the already existing snow, which really wouldn't be the case. The snow would have blown over and up top of the rocks, and there'd be a lot more snow over our rock formations here. So we're just going to add another filter that's going to allow us to play around with the snow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another blend node here. And I'm going to take again, uniform color. Just going to duplicate that guy. And actually, you know what? We don't even need to duplicate that guy. We can just take this node and share that. And boom, we're done. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to try and filter this out to make it look like we've got some fresh snow that's fallen over top of our rock. And so one way we can do that is we actually have a dust filter here, which is going to allow us to plug in our ambient occlusion to kind of help form some buildup of snow. And so I'm going to plug this into the opacity right now. I'm going to go back down to our ambient occlusion here, bring this up and plug that in. And so now we're going to get a bunch of different things that we're going to be able to play with. And so as I bring the level up, you can see that it's going to kind of fill in these crevice areas with snow and just basically use our ambient occlusion to push snow into any areas that snow would really kind of gather. You can also increase the occlusion amount to make it more or less buried. You can play around with the noise opacity, although I don't really think it looks too good. Maybe just a little subtle effect, but nothing too sharp. And that just kind of helps blend the rocks into the snow a little bit nicer. All right, and so we've gone ahead and created our albedo. I'm going to come down and I want to work on our roughness. I'm going to bring these guys down. And I'm just going to bring this guy over. And so I'm going to get rid of our grayscale and we're going to go back to that really, really super shiny plastic. And so a lot of our roughness comes from surface detail. And where we can get surface detail from is our normal map. So we can take our normal map and we can add a curvature smooth node onto that. And you can see we're going to get a lot of edge information in our node here, or our roughness. And this is going to allow us to basically have a jumping off point for our surfaces of our material here. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to invert this, because in a roughness map, the darker areas are the glossiest and the whiter areas are the roughest. And so that really doesn't make a lot of sense, because snow is not very rough, but in a roughness map, the whiter areas are the taller areas. And so they're going to be the roughest. So I'm going to use a levels node. And I'm going to just invert our map here. And so you can see now when I increase the roughness, you can't really see it too much on here, but you can see it on the rocks for sure. As I increase the roughness, it becomes a lot glossier. As I increase the black, it becomes glossier. As I increase the white, it becomes a lot rougher. And so that's just a good jumping off point. Now I want to start by basically isolating the rocks and the snow from each other so that we can just go ahead and change them independent of each other. I'm going to add a blend node here, and I'm going to Control D. And we're going to just take the same node and plug it in twice. And so why we're going to do that is because I want to use the information from the rocks and the snow here, but I don't want them to affect each other. And when I, increase the blackness on one, it's going to increase the blackness on all of it. And so how I'm going to basically mask these off is I'm just going to take the opacity and I'm going to come back and I'm going to use again the height blend mask that we've created so that I can affect them independent of each other. So now if we take a look at the blend and I increase the black on the rocks, it's only going to affect the rocks. And vice versa for the snow. If I increase the roughness or decrease the roughness of the snow, the rocks will remain the same. And so I'm going to do just that by increasing the glossiness and just decreasing the outputs so that we don't have a pure gloss or rough. And I'm going to do the same for the rocks and make those a little bit glossier. So that's a good start, but now I want to look to our albedo and see if any changes that we've made in there are going to affect glossy areas of our roughness map here. And the one that I can see is that snow cover that we've added on the rocks here. That might be a little bit glossier than the rocks themselves. So I'm going to come back up to where we've created that mask. And I'm going to use that in our blend. I'm going to plug that guy in our blend here. And I'm just going to plug in, again, the snow that we've created because I want it to be relatively the same as the snow that we've created around the rocks. And so you can see now when we click in here and we affect the levels again, those areas in our rocks are going to be a lot glossier. So we've completed our albedo and our roughness, and our normal height and ambient occlusion are pretty much all accounted for. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to make sure that we also deal with our metallic, bringing it to grayscale. And so we've completed all of our outputs here. The last thing I want to do is I want to bring it into a separate graph, and I just want to play around with it to give it a little bit more of ice features in case you wanted to add some ice to your snow. So I'm going to come up to our package. I'm going to right click, hit new, and substance graph. And I'm going to call this snock underscore ice. I'm going to hit OK. And so I'm going to bring in our snow graph by just clicking and dragging. And you can see if we double click, this is our entire graph with all of the outputs that we've created. And I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to type in water, and we're going to use a water level. And so we're going to be able to basically run through our snow here, through the water level and into the outputs. And we're going to be able to see the snow popping up with the ice in our graph here, or our editor. So I'm going to click on our water level because I want to make sure that we have all the channels that we need. And we don't really need a metallic, so I'm going to get rid of the metallic. And we can plug all these guys in, individually, or we can hit 3 on our keypad. And you can see we can come up here and just select compact material as well. Just click and drag that guy in. And if we hit 1 again, it's going to plug in all of our appropriate outputs here. And I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to hit 3. I'm just going to click and drag, and it's going to plug it into all of our outputs. And I'll just hit 1 again. And you can see that we're going to get some water showing up in our material. And now it's a little bit too tall. So I'm going to come down to, get rid of that channels, come down to water level, and I just want to decrease this. Maybe we just have some ice or water forming around there. And I want to come down to our frost. And if I increase our frost, you can see that we're going to get some frost kind of forming around the edges of the water. And we can also bring up the frost intensity, and it's just going to be more visible along the edges there. I'm going to bring the frost up to maybe around 0.5 so that it's a little bit more icy. Maybe bring the frost intensity down. And so now you can also add a little bit of ice to your snowy material there. And you can also play around with the amount of cracks and stuff as well. Right, and the intensity on that, or bring that really right down. And so this is just going to help you add a little bit more to your snow material. And so now I want to export all of these images because I like what I've done and I want to use this in, say, a game or a render engine. So once we've got that, we can come up to the graph that we're in and we like and we want the textures from, and we can right click it and we can export outputs as bitmaps. And so this is going to allow us to select which outputs we want. Well, I don't really need the metallic, so I can uncheck that. And then we can also select where we want to output these. And so I'm going to just put this in my delete folder because I don't need these textures. So I'm just going to select that. And we can also select how we're going to display these texture names. And you can see that we've got the $ graph. And so it's going to basically automatically input the graph name into the name of each of these textures and the identifier. So for each one of these, we're going to get snow underscore ice underscore base color, snow underscore ice underscore normal, roughness, height, and ambient occlusion. And then once you're happy with all of that, you can just click on export outputs. And depending on your resolution size, it will take longer or shorter. And then you can go into your folder here. And you'll be able to see that we've got our textures all exported as 2K images.